This is Rainy Night Horrors. Outside, the storm brews, and with it comes something darker. Every drop masks a sound, every shadow holds a shape. You're not imagining it. You're hearing the truth. Listen closely. It's already here. The sterile pulse of monitors, a metronome counting out the quiet hours, and the ghost whisper of crepe soles on polished floors. These were the constants of my nights polishing the shadowed corridors of Mercy General Hospital. I moved through a world hushed and waiting, accustomed to the peculiar stillness that descends after midnight. But one night, that profound quiet fractured, revealing a treacherous undercurrent that would drag me from my solitary routine into a vortex of fear and consequence. I recall the precise moment, a Wednesday dawn breaking somewhere beyond the hospital walls, the clock showing 3:17 a.m. My path led me down the third-floor wing, a familiar rhythm guiding my hands. Swab the floor, wipe the rails, lift the bin liner, move on. A ritual almost prayer-like in its repetition. Then, I registered her presence, an anomaly in the pre-dawn calm. Nurse Agnes, a woman whose formidable bearing usually commanded respect, seemed diminished, furtive. She lingered by the locked supply closet, her head snapping back and forth, scanning the empty hallway. Even from my distance, the fluorescent lights glinted off moisture, beading on her brow as her thick fingers wrestled with the lock. A current of unease pulled me closer, feigning intense focus on a scuff mark near the baseboard. I watched from the corner of my eye. What unfolded next sent a chill skittering down my spine. Agnes vanished into the closet's narrow darkness, only to reappear seconds later, her capacious handbag visibly strained at the seams. She moved away swiftly, her footsteps muffled but urgent against the linoleum. I waited, the silence amplifying my heartbeat, until her form dissolved around the far corner. The closet door, left imperfectly latched, beckoned. A gentle push, a protesting groan from the hinges, and I peered inside. The violation was stark. Neat gaps on the shelves, vacant spaces where vials of potent medication should have rested. My thoughts tangled. Agnes was pilfering pharmaceuticals. For profit? For personal use? The potential fallout was terrifying. Compromised care, endangered lives. Action was imperative, yet uncertainty paralyzed me. Agnes was a fixture at Mercy General, woven into the fabric of the staff for years. Who would credit the word of Elias, the night custodian, against hers? My course became clear. I needed irrefutable proof. Night after night, I became a shadow, observing Agnes with newfound vigilance. She was cunning, altering her methods, sometimes the supply closet, other times slipping vials directly from the emergency carts when she thought no one was watching. By week's end, my small notebook held a damning chronicle. Dates, times, estimations of the stolen drugs. Still, doubt gnawed at me. Could there be an innocent explanation I was too blind to see? My procrastination nearly proved fatal. Sunday night arrived, heavy with unspoken tension. Seeking solace in the harsh brew of break room coffee, I found myself face to face with her as she entered. The small room suddenly felt airless, charged. "Agnes," I began, the name tasting foreign, my voice striving for a level tone it didn't possess. "I saw you." at the supply closet. She froze mid-stride, her gaze sharpening into points of steel. Whatever are you insinuating, Elias? I inhaled, the cheap coffee scent acrid in my nostrils. I know you're taking the medication. I've seen it several times this past week. A flush crept up her neck, darkening her features. A vein throbbed visibly at her temple. You don't know anything, she spat, her voice a low hiss. Keep your nose out of where it doesn't belong. The atmosphere crackled, thick with menace. Agnes radiated volatility. Caution was essential. I can't ignore this, I stated, finding a firmness I hadn't known I possessed. It has to be reported. Faster than I could anticipate, she lunged, her strong hand twisting into the collar of my tunic. Her face loomed inches from mine, her breath hot and sharp. You won't say a word, she snarled, the threat vibrating through her grip. If you do, you'll wish you hadn't. Raw fear clamped down, stealing my breath. Her strength was alarming. I twisted, trying to break her hold. Let go, I choked out, my pulse hammering against my ribs. For a fraction of a second, she hesitated, her eyes narrowed, appraising me. Then, with explosive force, she shoved me backward. I slammed against a table, a sharp agony lancing through my spine as I crumpled to the floor, the air punched from my lungs. Scrambling upright, fueled by a surge of adrenaline, I saw her advancing, her face a mask of fury. Escape was the only thought. Find help, expose her before she could silence me permanently. I bolted, ignoring the searing pain in my side, my footsteps echoing unnaturally in the deserted corridor. Where could I turn? The hospital felt vast and empty, the few night staff sequestered behind closed doors. Rounding a corner blindly, I almost collided with Dr. Aris Thorne, a senior physician whose calm demeanor I'd often observed. He arched a questioning eyebrow at my wild eyes and disheveled state. Elias? Everything all right? His voice held genuine concern. Hesitation warred with urgency. Could I trust him? Time was slipping away. Doctor, I need your help, I gasped, glancing back down the hallway. It's about Nurse Agnes. Dr. Thorne guided me to a secluded alcove, away from any potential listeners. Tell me what's happened, he urged, his expression serious. Drawing a ragged breath, I recounted everything, the words tumbling out, laced with tremors. Agnes, she's been stealing drugs from the closets, the carts. I saw her. I confronted her, and she attacked me, threatened me. I didn't know what else to do. His eyes widened slightly, absorbing the shock. Are you certain about this, Elias? He asked, his tone grave but steady. I nodded vehemently, a wave of relief washing over me. Someone was listening. I wrote it all down, this whole week. Dates, times, what she took. It's all in my notebook. Dr. Thorne processed this, his gaze thoughtful. This requires immediate action, he declared finally, but carefully. If what you say is true, she could be unpredictable. Together, we made our way to the hospital administrator's office. Dr. Thorne laid out the situation in low, urgent tones while I presented my notebook, its pages filled with my cramped handwriting. The administrator listened without interruption, her face growing increasingly stern. "An investigation will begin at once," she stated, her voice resolute. "Thank you, Elias, for your courage in bringing this forward." The subsequent hours blurred into a tense tableau of hushed conversations and official movements. I stayed near Dr. Thorne, the memory of Agnes's fury making solitude feel dangerous. Whispers followed me through the halls, staff cast sideways, curious glances. As dawn painted the windows, security personnel escorted a struggling, shouting Agnes from the premises, her enraged curses echoing down the corridor. I watched from a distance, a strange cocktail of fear and vindication churning within me. The immediate threat had passed, but her parting glare felt like a promise. In the following days, Mercy General implemented stricter controls, new protocols governing every vial and tablet. I received quiet commendations for my bravery, yet a persistent disquiet remained. Agnes's threat lingered like a phantom limb. The night shift continued, but its familiar contours felt altered. Every unexpected noise made me flinch. Shadows seemed deeper, potentially concealing menace. I developed a habit of scanning peripheries, half expecting her enraged face to materialize from the gloom. Weeks bled into months. Gradually, the sharp edge of fear began to dull. The hospital absorbed the disruption, settling back into its established rhythms. I, too, found a semblance of normalcy, breathing easier in the quiet hours. Yet, the experience had irrevocably marked me. The hospital was no longer merely a place of employment. It was a territory I had defended, a place where I'd confronted a hidden darkness and somehow prevailed. One evening, as my shift drew to a close, Dr. Thorne found me near the main entrance. "Elias," he said, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "I wanted to express my gratitude again. That took considerable fortitude. You likely prevented serious harm." A faint smile touched my lips. "I only did what felt necessary, Doctor." Walking out into the nascent morning light, the sun igniting the hospital's upper windows, a quiet sense of pride settled over me. I had arrived as just Elias, the night custodian, largely unseen. Now, I carried the knowledge that I had made a tangible difference, safeguarding the very people whose traces I was hired to erase each night. The building loomed behind me, no longer just brick and mortar, but a symbol, a testament to the potential for courage residing within the ordinary. Driving home, weary but strangely fulfilled, I understood my role had shifted. It wasn't just about clean floors and empty bins anymore. It was about vigilance, about protection. That night, confronting Agnes had been terrifying, yes, but it had also illuminated a strength within myself I hadn't known existed. Faced with peril, I had held my ground. In doing so, I hadn't just altered the hospital's internal landscape, I had reshaped my own. As I finally succumbed to sleep that morning, the week's events flickering behind my closed eyelids, I knew my perspective on this job was forever changed. The mop and bucket remained my tools, but now they symbolized something more profound, a quiet commitment to shielding the vulnerable, to upholding what's right, regardless of the personal cost. And as sleep claimed me, a thought surfaced. What other secrets did these nocturnal hours hold? Whatever lay ahead, I felt a quiet certainty I would be ready. The city exhaled its last train, a rattling metal serpent sliding through the subterranean dark, and I was coiled inside it. Exhaustion had hollowed me out. The carriage felt cavernous, populated by sparse islands of humanity, adrift in their own weariness, the air thick with the day's stale breath. I sought refuge, mid-car, sinking onto the worn vinyl, the overhead fluorescence stuttering like dying nerves. A brief surrender to fatigue, eyes closed against the flickering pulse above. Then awareness snapped back, sharp and unwelcome. My gaze landed across the aisle, several seats adrift, upon a figure anchored in absolute stillness. His attention wasn't casual, it was a laser, fixed solely upon me, unwavering, intense. He wasn't glancing about, not consulting a device, not shifting his weight. A statue carved from shadow, observing. I tore my eyes away, dismissing it. A mind adrift, perhaps, lost in thought. Yet each furtive check confirmed the unnerving truth. His gaze remained, a palpable weight, never deviating. Late night transit breeds eccentricities, I reasoned, clinging to normalcy in the echoing void. I adjusted my position, turning slightly, presenting my shoulder as a shield, hoping the implicit dismissal might break the spell. It didn't. In the grimy pane, reflecting the tunnel's fleeting lights, his silhouette remained, immobile, eyes still pinned to mine. His face held a disquieting ambiguity. Not quite a smile, but the ghost of one haunted the corners of his lips, a rictus of predatory curiosity, as if my discomfort were a private amusement. The train groaned onward, wheels screaming against the curve of the tracks, my focus locked onto the scuffed linoleum, counting the rhythmic bumps, calculating the diminishing stations until my own. A mistake, looking up again. He had migrated, one seat closer. The angle of his body subtly, undeniably altered, canted towards me. The stare persisted, unwavering, that unnerving half-smile deepening infinitesimally. A cold fist clenched around my heart. Adrenaline surged, a primal command. Move, flee. But the carriage offered no sanctuary. Only him, me, and the oblivious few scattered too far to be allies. The next stop, then, not mine, but it would have to do. Wait on the platform, perhaps brave the walk through the sleeping streets. As the train decelerated, brakes hissing, I stood. He rose, in perfect synchrony. A jolt, pure animal panic shot through me. My thoughts scattered like frightened birds. Don't react. Don't betray the fear clawing up your throat. I stared straight ahead, projecting an indifference I didn't feel, praying for his interest to wane. The doors sighed open. I stepped out swiftly, aiming for the stairs, the promise of open air. Footfalls echoed behind me, measured, deliberate, unnervingly close. A quick sideways glance confirmed it. He was there, mere paces behind, that chilling expression unchanged. Fear tightened its grip. My palms grew slick, my pulse hammered against my ribs. The urge to sprint warred with the instinct to avoid a scene, to not draw further attention. I quickened my pace, hoping distance would deter him. Each furtive check revealed his persistence, mirroring my steps, his gaze never breaking its lock. Desperate, I veered into another station entrance, descending nearby, hoping the labyrinthine passages might swallow him. Down the tiled steps I hurried, his pursuing footsteps reverberating off the cold walls, amplifying the chase. I tried to dissolve into the sparse late-night travelers milling about, a futile attempt at camouflage. It was as if he possessed some invisible tether, some uncanny sense guiding him. Wherever I moved, his presence materialized nearby, a silent, watchful shadow. Panic began to fray the edges of my control. Was this a game? Would boredom eventually claim him? A deeper instinct screamed otherwise. His methodical pursuit, the sheer intensity of his focus, felt chillingly purposeful. Spotting the next train arriving, I slipped aboard, finding a seat near the front, hoping the crowd, the motion, anything, would grant me anonymity. As the doors sealed us in and the train lurched forward, a scan backward confirmed my dread. There he was, several rows behind, settled, watching, smiling that same spectral smile. Subtlety dissolved. I stood abruptly, walking the length of the car to stand by the doors at the opposite end, putting maximum distance between us. My eyes fixed on the metal barrier, refusing to look back, refusing him the satisfaction of witnessing my terror. Yet, I felt his gaze, a physical pressure on my back. The train slowed again. My mind raced, evaluating dwindling options. Staying aboard felt like madness, risking him following me all the way home. A decision solidified. The instant the doors parted, I bolted, out onto the platform, up the stairs towards the exit, not daring to look back. I heard his steps behind me, faster now, closer. My heart hammered against my sternum, breath tearing in my throat, the world blurring into a smear of fear and flight. Let them stare. Let them think me mad. Escape was the only imperative. I burst onto the street, gulping the cool, damp night air, eyes darting for refuge. Across the asphalt river, a convenience store shimmered, an oasis of garish light. I sprinted towards it, a desperate dash, the echo of his pursuit sharp at my heels. A final glance back as I breached the glass door. He stood arrested on the curb, bathed in the sodium glow of a streetlight, that twisted smile fixed, watching me retreat into the fluorescent haven. He didn't follow inside. He merely waited, a sentinel of dread. The clerk glanced up, his expression registering the panic undoubtedly etched on my features, but I offered no immediate explanation. Feigning interest in luridly packaged snacks, I kept one eye fixed on the figure outside. He remained rooted to the spot, watching, waiting. My heart refused to slow. My hands trembled as I pretended to browse, mimicking normalcy while trapped in a bubble of terror. Each time I looked, he was still there, the unsettling curve of his lips unwavering under the streetlights. Minutes stretched taut. He didn't move. My phone yielded no answer from a friend. Trapped. Cornered. Finally, gathering scraps of courage, I approached the counter. In hushed, urgent tones, I explained about the man, the pursuit. The clerk listened, his face growing serious, nodding slowly. He offered sanctuary, a place to wait until the watcher departed, the use of a phone if needed. A fragile tendril of relief unfurled within me, the simple solidarity of a stranger. Together, we stood under the harsh fluorescent glare, watching the watcher. He lingered a few moments more, a statue of silent menace. Then, abruptly, without preamble, he turned and melted back into the urban night from which he'd emerged. I remained in the bright safety of the store long after he vanished, letting the adrenaline ebb, ensuring the coast was truly clear. Stepping back onto the pavement felt like surfacing from deep, dangerous water, my pulse still erratic, hands unsteady. I had evaded something awful, something whose conclusion felt terrifyingly uncertain. Weeks have bled into months, yet the chill of that night lingers. Every late train journey, every peripheral glimpse of a watchful stranger resurrects the phantom pressure of his gaze, the icy dread. Who he was, the reason he chose me, these remain unsettling voids. But the image endures, the absolute stillness, the unwavering eyes, and that twisted smile, etched forever onto the dark canvas of memory. The wilderness beckoned, promising sanctuary. Just Liam and Noah, two souls seeking refuge from the city's relentless hum. 2 days burrowed deep in the woods, an escape meticulously mapped. Shelters, sustenance, illumination for the encroaching dark, and a modest cache of ale for camaraderie. Familiar ground, this venturing forth, a ritual oft repeated. Our inaugural day unfolded like a sun-drenched map. We claimed a pocket meadow ringed by ancient sentinels, adequately distanced from the warm path, yet promising solitude. Twin domes of canvas rose. A modest pyre soon blossomed, and as twilight painted the sky in bruised purples, contentment settled over us. Around the flickering heart of the fire, words flowed freely. The burdens of occupation, the labyrinth of existence, conversations too fragile for the city's cacophony. Night deepened, hushing the woodland symphony, save for the fire's hungry crackle, its amber light bathing our faces against the encroaching chill. We leaned back, spirits eased by ale and laughter, cocooned in the quiet murmur of wind through pine needles and the sporadic query of a distant owl. Precisely the solace sought, a tranquil haven carved from the wild. Then, somewhere past the meridian of night, it sliced through the profound quiet, a peal of laughter, thin yet distinct, sharp as obsidian. Noah and I became statues, gazes locking across the dying flames, mirroring the disquiet blooming in my own chest. No warmth resided in that sound. It was alien, discordant, tinged with a derision that prickled the skin. "Did you?" My query emerged a strained whisper, betraying the tremor I fought to conceal. Noah affirmed with a tight nod, his head canting towards the shadowed perimeter, features taut. A nearby camp? The thought felt flimsy, a desperate grasp for normalcy. The trail had been ours alone, our seclusion deliberately sought. Rationalization warred with instinct. Mere minutes crawled by before the sound returned, amplified, nearer now, reverberating amongst the timber. An icy serpent coiled down my spine. This was no sound of human merriment. It possessed a vacant, echoing quality, mirth utterly divorced from joy. We smothered the fire's last embers, plunging ourselves into a deeper vulnerability, seeking anonymity in the inkwell darkness. Instantly, the woods transformed, its familiar shapes acquiring a predatory edge. Each nocturnal whisper gained monstrous proportions. The snap of a twig, the sigh of foliage, the phantom resonance of that laughter weaving through the silence. When the laughter finally ceased, a shared exhalation ghosted between us, a fragile hope shattered moments later by the sound of footfalls, measured, unhurried, crunching softly on the forest floor, circling our small encampment. My eyes strained against the impenetrable black, the clouded sky swallowing any trace of moonlight. Beside me, Noah was rigid, breath held captive in his lungs. The steps drew closer, a deliberate patrol, an unnerving awareness of our presence palpable in their rhythm. A predator playing with its quarry. My pulse hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the suffocating quiet. My fist clenched around the cold metal of the torch, the impulse to flood the clearing with light fiercely suppressed. Revealing our position felt like suicide. Abruptly, the pacing ceased. Silence descended, thick and expectant. Then, a sudden violation, the unmistakable sounds of intrusion. Our supplies, carelessly stored outside the tents, were being disturbed. A metallic clatter of tins, the rough scrape of canvas, the tearing shriek of zippers. Noah's stillness beside me was absolute, his terror a palpable wave in the dark. An age seemed to pass in that auditory invasion before stillness reigned once more. Yet, we remained paralyzed, twin figures carved from fear, listening. My grip on the torch was bone white, a desperate anchor. A cold film of sweat slicked my brow. Every nerve ending screamed. And then, the laugh. Not distant now, but chillingly close, practically breathing down our necks. Raw instinct detonated. I thumbed the switch, slicing the darkness with a frantic beam, sweeping it wildly across the clearing. Nothing. Only the impassive boles of trees, the dance of elongated shadows, the void where our tormentor should be. The laughter erupted again, impossibly, from the opposite side of our small camp, mocking our disorientation, playing hide-and-seek in the shadows. "Noah, we have to go." The words tore from my throat, ragged and trembling. No descent came. We scrambled for our packs, foregoing inventory in the desperate urgency to flee. Escape was the only imperative. We plunged onto the trail, beams from our torches stabbing nervously into the oppressive gloom, our pace bordering on a run. The night offered only the frantic tattoo of our own flight, the frantic thumping in my ears. Yet, the forest wasn't truly silent. Behind us, phantom sounds persisted. The sharp crack of a stepped-on branch, the furtive rustle of undergrowth, and always, threading through it, that damnable, disembodied laughter. My head snapped back repeatedly, seeking confirmation of pursuit, finding only shifting darkness and the jittery play of light on leaves. Noah's face, caught intermittently in the spill of my beam, was a mask of pale determination, his silence a testament to shared terror. Perhaps an hour dissolved in our panicked retreat before a small, moon-dappled glade offered a brief respite. We collapsed, lungs burning, bodies slick with exertion and fear. My torch beam remained fixed on the tree line, trembling in my grasp. The quiet here felt different, charged, expectant, as if the very air held its breath. Then, the sound returned. Footsteps, emerging from the path we'd just fled. Unhurried, methodical, as if our pause had been anticipated. I saw the whites of Noah's eyes flare in the gloom. We lurched to our feet, retreating instinctively, torch beams wavering wildly towards the encroaching sound. "Who's out there?" My voice cracked, a pathetic challenge swallowed by the immense woods. Silence answered, save for the inexorable advance. Closer, nearer. Primal terror urged flight, yet my feet felt welded to the earth. Paralyzed, I stared into the wall of blackness, awaiting the revelation. And then, it materialized, a silhouette detaching itself from the deeper shadows at the clearing's edge. Tall, indistinct, its features lost to the night. It simply stood, an unnerving stillness radiating from it, an unseen gaze pinning us in place. Ice flooded my veins. No face was visible, no form discernible beyond a general shape. Yet the sensation of being observed, assessed, was absolute and terrifying. Noah's hand clamped onto my arm, a jolt that broke the paralysis. "Liam, run!" His whisper was frayed with panic. We spun and bolted, heedless of the path, driven solely by the imperative to escape. Our flight was a blind, stumbling chaos, the forest a peripheral blur, shadows grasping like skeletal hands. Direction dissolved. Getting lost seemed trivial compared to capture. Behind us, impossibly, the steady tread resumed, an unflagging pursuit, immune to our desperate speed. And the laughter, that hollow, grating sound, swelled again, seeming to emanate from the very trees around us. Time warped in our terror-fueled sprint. Then, a flicker of recognition, a gnarled oak, a distinctive blaze on a trunk, landmarks from our inward journey. Relief surged, a desperate hope igniting. The parking lot, the car, salvation. We drove our protesting limbs harder, lungs searing, muscles screaming. The gravel expanse of the lot appeared like a mirage. We lunged for the vehicle, fingers clumsy with adrenaline, the key fumbling thrice before finding the lock. Inside, doors slammed, locks clicked, a fragile shield. The engine roared to life, tires spitting gravel as I wrenched us away from the tree line's dark maw. A compulsive glance in the rearview mirror revealed only receding darkness, the silent, empty woods reclaiming their secrets. The drive back unfolded in suffocating silence, gazes fixed forward, minds reeling. No words could shape the experience. What nameless thing had stalked us through the night, watching, pursuing, deriving amusement from our fear? The question echoed unanswered, overshadowed by the certainty that the sound of that vacant, derisive laughter would forever echo in the haunted corridors of memory. The attic wasn't a destination I sought, merely a neglected summit in the geography of our two-story house, a place where forgotten things went to ossify. Eliza and I, bound by a shared existence within these walls, had finally conceded. The strata of accumulated years demanded excavation. Up there, beneath the low-slung rafters, lay a sediment of discarded wardrobes, spectral furniture draped in dust sheets, and the general detritus of lives lived. It was a mausoleum of memory, thick with the cloying scent of decay and time. A single naked bulb sputtered reluctantly to life at the flick of a switch, casting a sickly, hesitant glow upon the chaos. My mission was purgation, a ruthless cull of the unnecessary. But then, tucked away behind scarred valises in the furthest, dimmest corner, I unearthed them, the photographs. Not familial relics, no yellowed portraits of ancestors I vaguely recalled. These faces were utterly alien. They existed in stark monochrome, their attire speaking of decades past, perhaps the mid-20th century's sober fashions. Men in stiff collars, women with sculpted hair, adolescents caught in the awkward cusp of becoming. None sparked recognition. Each resided within a simple, unadorned frame. A peculiar tension radiated from them, shoulders held rigid, expressions clenched, gazes either boring into the lens with unnerving intensity or averted, as if shying from an unseen judgment. A prickle, cold and sharp, traced a path up my spine as I sifted through the stack. An inexplicable disquiet emanated from these frozen visages. Setting aside the first few, I registered the true extent. Dozens more lay hidden, layered like geological findings. Whose collection was this? Why secreted here? The house had been my great-uncle Alistair's, a man of quiet habits who'd bequeathed it without mentioning such a peculiar cache. Under the flickering bulb, I carried a selection to a dilapidated table, hoping for inscriptions, dates, some clue etched onto the backboards. Nothing. The cardboard was blank, anonymous. Dust, fine as powdered bone, coated my fingers as I handled the frames. A chill permeated the air, distinct from the ambient cool of the neglected space, raising the fine hairs along my forearms. Logic dictated boxing them up, hauling them downstairs for disposal. Yet, a stubborn curiosity, insidious and compelling, took root. I resolved to hang a few, arrange them on a clear patch of wall near the attic's entrance. Perhaps closer scrutiny, a different angle, would reveal a hidden detail, a landmark, a name on a background sign. Locating a rusted hammer and a fistful of bent nails, I mounted 4-5 portraits. Stepping back, I felt their collective gaze fall upon me. Though faded, their eyes retained a stark power that tightened a knot in my stomach. That day's work concluded with the hanging of those few silent witnesses. The remaining frames I stacked neatly, a somber archive in the corner, before descending to the comparative normalcy of the lower floors. Eliza was immersed in sorting books, sunlight glinting off the spines. "How'd it go up there?" she asked, her voice muffled by shelves. "Dusty," I replied, offering only the surface truth. Explaining the unease stirred by the photographs felt impossible, an abstract dread I couldn't yet shape into words. So, I held it close. Sleep proved elusive that night. Lying in the enveloping darkness, my thoughts strayed stubbornly upwards, circling the mystery of those monochrome faces, their identities lost to time. Eventually, exhaustion claimed me. Around the nadir of the night, perhaps 3 o'clock, a faint, rhythmic tapping roused me. Initially, I dismissed it as the house breathing, the familiar creaks and sighs of old timber settling, but the sound persisted, delicate yet distinct, like hesitant footfalls directly overhead. Leaning over, I squinted at the clock's luminous dial, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. A tremor of unease flooded in my chest, though I chided myself for succumbing to paranoia. I lay listening, straining against the silence, until concluding it must be imagination, an echo of the day's unsettling discovery. The following morning, returning to the attic's dusty embrace, the first thing that struck me was the arrangement of the photographs. They weren't quite as I'd left them. Hung in a precise row, they now seemed subtly askew, one angled slightly, as if nudged by an unseen hand. A quick survey revealed no obvious cause. The small window remained sealed, the floor dust undisturbed. With a shrug I couldn't quite believe, I straightened them and resumed my task. Much of the day vanished into the mindless sorting of boxes. Periodically, my gaze drifted to the portraits on the wall. Each time, something felt altered. Was it the play of shadows, or did the angles of their faces shift, almost imperceptibly? I tried to dismiss the sensation as fatigue, an overactive imagination. Then, just before breaking for lunch, I saw it clearly. One frame was undeniably tilted again, its top edge leaning away from the plaster. As I reached to adjust it, a sudden rush of frigid air swept across my back. I spun around, heart leaping. Nothing. Only the stagnant, musty air. When I mentioned the shiftish frames to Eliza later, she offered practical solutions. They're probably just loose on the nails, Leo. Stop fixating. She volunteered to help bring them down if they were bothering me. No, I heard myself say. I want to keep them up a bit longer. Try to figure them out. She gave a small shrug, sensing my preoccupation, and let it rest. That evening, compelled by lingering anxiety, I decided on a final check before bed. Flashlight in hand, I ascended the narrow attic stairs. The overhead bulb flickered on, initially revealing nothing amiss. But as I drew closer to the wall, I focused on the faces. They had changed. The inherent tension remained, yet now it seemed tinged with desperation, a silent pleading directed squarely at me. My pulse hammered against my ribs. Imagination, I insisted silently, just tricks of light and shadow on old paper. Turning off the light, I started towards the stairs. A sharp scrape echoed behind me, the distinct sound of a frame dragging briefly across the wooden floorboards. I whirled, the flashlight beam slicing through the darkness, nearly fumbling the heavy cylinder. The beam swept the floor. All the hung pictures remained on their nails. What then had made the sound? I stood frozen, breathing raggedly, scanning the cluttered space. Everything appeared undisturbed. Eventually, forcing leaden feet, I retreated downstairs, the flashlight slick with sweat in my grip. The subsequent days were punctuated by phantom sounds from above, the intermittent tapping, a soft, protracted creaking that Eliza, on the rare occasions she noticed, attributed to the house's venerable age. During my daytime forays into the attic, the conviction grew stronger. The frames were subtly migrating, not dramatic rearrangements, but minute shifts in spacing, slight variations in height. I found myself constantly readjusting them, trying to restore an order that felt increasingly violated. And the faces, each time I looked, their distress seemed more palpable. Certain eyes appeared to track my movements, a disconcerting effect I tried to debunk by shifting my perspective, stepping left, then right. It wasn't mere parallax. A proximity threshold existed. Get too close, and that familiar cold dread would bloom at the nape of my neck. On the fourth night, a sharp, resonant thump from directly overhead jolted me from sleep. No hesitation this time. I snatched the flashlight and crept upwards, heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, mouth dry as dust. Flipping the attic switch, my eyes immediately found the source. One of the frames lay face down on the floorboards. Miraculously, the glass was intact, but the backing panel gaped open, the photograph slightly dislodged within. I picked it up. The hanging wire was sound. The nail remained firmly embedded in the wall. There was no earthly reason for it to have fallen. Holding the frame, I studied the portrait. A man, brow deeply furrowed, eyes fixed ahead as if bracing for an imminent blow. A detail snagged my attention, previously unnoticed. His tie was slightly askew, a small imperfection suggesting haste. Carefully, I slid the photo back into place, secured the backing, and rehung the frame, testing its stability. Silence reclaimed the attic, absolute and heavy, broken only by the frantic drumming of my own pulse. Sleep was now a remote possibility. I retreated to the living room, the television murmuring on low volume, a futile attempt to drown out the churning thoughts. Why were they moving? How could expressions etched in silver nitrate decades ago seemingly morph and plead? A knot of primal fear tightened in my gut. Action was necessary. Either banish them entirely or uncover their shadowed origins. The next day, I phoned Cormac, an acquaintance with a penchant for antique photography. Could old prints warp or change? Yes, he affirmed. Humidity, light exposure, the usual culprits. But not like this. Not in the way my carefully vague questions hinted at. I didn't mention the ambulatory frames, the footsteps in the dead of night. His expertise offered no solace. Back in the attic, I pulled more frames from the boxes, scrutinizing backs, peering inside, desperate for any identifying mark. Still, nothing. Utter anonymity. That afternoon, with Eliza out, I undertook a deliberate rearrangement, hoping a new configuration might unlock some hidden pattern. I lined a dozen visages in a long row, placing another cluster beneath them. Stepping back, a fresh wave of unease washed over me. The figures in the lower row seemed angled subtly upwards, their collective gaze fixed on the portraits above. The effect was intensely unnerving. My pulse throbbed in my ears. Shuffling the frames achieved nothing. The tense, urgent energy remained, regardless of their placement. It felt like trespassing, stumbling into a private, perpetual crisis. Evening descended. As I prepared for bed, the footsteps resumed overhead, slow, measured, crossing the attic floor. I froze at the base of the ladder, listening, scalp prickling. "Hello?" I called out, my voice thin in the quiet house. Silence answered. The steps ceased. Flashlight beam. Cutting ahead, I climbed, switched on the light. Several frames now leaned against the wall at floor level, removed from their nails without apparent cause. I picked one up. The man whose eyes seemed perpetually turned left, seeking something just beyond the border. My hand trembled as I replaced it on its nail. Enough. The situation had become untenable, the strangeness too persistent, too invasive. Fetching a sturdy cardboard box, I began methodically removing the frames from the wall. Each one felt unnaturally heavy, imbued with a reluctance to leave its post. An unsettling counter-impulse whispered at me to put them back, that some unseen presence demanded their display. I ignored it, packing them away, portrait after silent portrait. Only one remained, overlooked near the door in my haste. As the box filled, a woman with stark, wide eyes and fists clenched tight at her sides. Box sealed, I hurried downstairs, depositing it in the cool darkness of a storage room off the garage. Later I decided I would contact an expert, someone versed in historical artifacts, or the occult, perhaps. Relief warred with lingering dread as I finally sought sleep. Sometime in the pre-dawn stillness, a loud, grating scrape tore through the quiet, originating unmistakably from the attic. It sounded heavy, laborious, something being dragged across the floorboards. My chest constricted. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through the layers of exhaustion. I lay rigid, heart hammering, desperately trying to rationalize the sound. Wind, settling foundations, vermin. But the dragging continued, protracted, ending finally with a solid, definitive thump. I remained in bed, staring sightlessly at the ceiling, mind racing through impossible scenarios. Had the forgotten frame fallen? Had the stacked boxes toppled? Why? How? Morning, I told myself. I would confront it in the morning. Pulling the covers tighter, I squeezed my eyes shut, willing the world away. Now I sit here, recounting this in the fragile light of day. The attic broods silently above, but the quiet feels precarious, stretched thin, waiting. Eliza suggests practicality. Haul the junk away, call a structural engineer to diagnose the groans and shifts. Perhaps I will. Yet, a deeper, more insistent part of me feels entangled, obligated to understand the source of this disquiet. Answers remain elusive. All I possess is the chilling certainty that those photographs harbor something profoundly disturbing. It transcends their unsettling appearance, their inexplicable movements. It's the palpable presence they evoke, a window onto something I instinctively recoil from. They are confined to the storage room for now, yet I wonder if mere distance is enough, because each night the faint echo of footsteps returns, a rhythm I cannot silence. And each morning I brace myself, half expecting to find the attic door mysteriously ajar, the frames resurrected on the wall, their monochrome eyes fixed upon me once more. That thought, more than any sound, is what truly keeps me awake. A rasping, like claws on dry timber, filtered down from the void directly over my headboard. Initially, my mind grasped for mundane explanations, the old house groaning in its sleep, perhaps, or frantic scrabbling from some nocturnal creature nested beneath the eaves. But lying rigid in the smothering dark, eyes stretched wide, I recognized the cadence, too deliberate, too rhythmic. This was no settling beam, no errant squirrel. This was occupation. Weeks it had been, punctuated by muffled thuds and furtive creaks from the attic space, dismissed until now as the usual spectral whispers of aged architecture. Tonight, the whispers had coalesced into undeniable articulation. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the stillness. I levered myself upright, a slow, fluid motion meant to displace no air, make no sound. The scraping persisted, a relentless friction against the ceiling plaster. My fingers, numb and trembling, fumbled for the sleek coldness of my phone on the bedside table. The numbers swam before my eyes. 911. The instant my thumb depressed the call icon, the noise ceased. Utterly. A vacuum rushed into the space it left. Holding my breath, phone clamped to my ear, I strained against the profound silence, awaiting the dispatcher's connection. Then, just as a tinny voice crackled to life, a heavy thump resonated from above, followed by the unmistakable percussion of rapid, weighty footfalls crossing the attic floor. 911, state your emergency. A strangled whisper escaped me. Someone's in my attic. Please, you have to hurry. I choked out the address, disconnected, my entire frame vibrating like a struck tuning fork. The overhead movement had halted, replaced by faint, papery rustlings. Whoever, whatever, was up there remained, shifting, listening. Bare feet met the frigid kiss of the hardwood floor as I slid from the bed. Escape beckoned, down the stairs, out the front door, but the staircase descended directly beneath the square outline of the attic hatch. A bottleneck, a trap. Retreating, I crept towards the closet's deeper shadows, my hand closing around the familiar weight of the ash wood baseball bat. Sweat slicked my palms. My gaze remained locked on the ceiling, searching for any telltale bulge or crack. Minutes stretched, elastic and agonizing. Where were they? I listened, desperate for the distant wail of sirens, hearing only the ragged whistle of my own breath and the occasional nerve-shredding pop from the timbers above. Then, a new sound, colder than the floorboards beneath my feet, slithered from the hallway just beyond my bedroom. The soft, grating slide of the attic access panel being nudged aside. My throat seized. They were coming down. I flattened myself against the wall beside the doorframe, bat hoisted, muscles screaming with tension. The frantic thudding in my chest felt loud enough to betray me. Floorboards groaned in the corridor, protesting slow, deliberate wait. A pause directly outside my door. I held my breath until my lungs burned. Slowly, inexorably, the doorknob began to rotate. The door eased inward, spilling a sliver of dim moonlight onto the floor, painting a long, distorted shadow that preceded the figure stepping into the room. I swung, pouring every ounce of terror and adrenaline into the arc. A sickening crack echoed in the confined space, followed by a strangled cry. The intruder staggered, reeling backward. I didn't hesitate. I surged past them, a blur of motion, down the darkened stairwell, fumbling with the deadbolt, bursting out into the sharp, clean shock of the night air. I sprinted across the lawn to my neighbor's porch, hammering on the door until a welcoming rectangle of light spilled out. As the door creaked open, the blessed, rising crescendo of approaching sirens finally reached my ears. The ensuing hour dissolved into a fragmented montage of flashing lights, uniformed figures, and clipped questions. A meticulous search yielded nothing. The house stood empty, violated, but vacant. Assurances were offered, increased patrols, the suggestion of staying with friends. Yet, a residue of wrongness clung to me. The intruder's movements, their seeming knowledge of the house's intimate geography. It felt less like a random break-in, more like a practiced infiltration. Against all sensible advice, I remained. An inexplicable compulsion anchored me there, a need to understand the violation of my own sanctuary. The following day, a locksmith fortified my home, replacing every cylinder, every bolt. A new security system arrived, its electronic eyes covering every conceivable point of entry. But peace remained elusive. Each settling groan of the house became a footstep. Every shadow seemed to coalesce. Paranoia became my unwelcome companion. I found myself scrutinizing misplaced details. A book shifted on its shelf. A mug in the sink I couldn't recall using. I began a methodical, almost feverish examination of my home, seeking the invisible seam, the point of ingress. It was during this obsessive reconnaissance in the seldom used guest room that my fingers brushed against it. Trailing along the baseboard, I felt an almost imperceptible give in the wall panel. My pulse leapt. Pressing harder, a small section swung silently inward on hidden hinges, revealing a narrow, choked cavity, thick with the scent of dust and stale air. My flashlight beam sliced into the darkness, illuminated crude wooden rungs ascending into the attic's shadowed recesses. My hand shook. A hidden artery, feeding directly into the house's hidden heart. All this time, Prudence screamed retreat, demanded I call the authorities, but a darker curiosity, a desperate need for answers, drowned it out. Taking a shuddering breath, I began to climb. The attic yawned above, larger than I'd perceived, a cavernous space stretching the length of the house. Dust motes danced in the torchlight, illuminating skeletal furniture draped in white sheets and teetering stacks of forgotten boxes. Deeper within, beyond the familiar clutter, my beam snagged on something incongruous. Tucked in the furthest corner, shielded by a bulwark of steamer trunks, lay a makeshift nest, a stained sleeping bag, a scattering of empty food wrappers and plastic water bottles. An overturned crate served as a nightstand, supporting a small battery-operated lamp and a pile of dog-eared paperbacks. But it was the wall behind this squalid encampment that arrested my breath. It was plastered with photographs. Dozens. My stomach lurched as I stepped closer. They were all of me. Alara walking to her car. Alara tending the rose bushes. Alara curled on the living room sofa, reading. Some were clearly snapped from concealment outside, but others possessed an impossible intimacy, angles achievable only from within these walls. The truth struck with the force of a physical blow. Someone had been dwelling here, inches above my life, observing, cataloging my existence for months. I stumbled back, vision swimming. Get out, call the police. Now. But as I turned, frantic to escape, my light grazed another anomaly, a small, low door set into the angled knee wall. It hung slightly ajar. A faint, phosphorescent glow emanated from the sliver of darkness beyond. Every nerve shrieked danger, urged flight, yet my feet carried me forward, drawn by a terrible magnetic pull. I had to see. I nudged the small door wider, wincing at the groan of protesting hinges. The space within was cramped, scarcely larger than a closet. Its contents stole the air from my lungs. The walls were a chaotic tapestry of frantic script, scrawled messages, rambling manifestos, disconnected sentences bleeding into one another. At the center stood a small, rickety table. On it, a laptop hummed softly, its screen casting an eerie blue light. Compelled, I leaned closer, my gaze snagged by the open document. The words swam into focus, chilling me to the bone. Day 156. She nearly discovered me. Careless sounds. My error. But patience. She isn't prepared. Not yet. Soon, she will grasp the necessity of my presence, the purpose of this vigil. She is the nexus, the sole catalyst. She simply hasn't awakened to it. Tears blurred the text. This presence, this watcher, had inhabited my home, my life, for over 5 months, believing me chosen? For what? A shuffling sound spun me around, heart leaping into my throat. Blocking the cramped room's only exit stood a figure, silhouetted against the attic's gloom. I could discern a tangle of wild, unkempt hair, eyes gleaming with a disturbing, fervent light. "You weren't meant to find this space yet," the stranger rasped, voice thick with disuse. "But perhaps the time is right. Perhaps you are finally ready for the truth." I recoiled, my back hitting the edge of the small table. "Who are you? What is it you want?" The stranger advanced, bringing with them the faint, cloying aroma of unwashed confinement and stale provisions. "I am here for your salvation, for our salvation. You are the key, Alara. Can't you perceive it? Your research, your specific work, it holds the cipher we've desperately sought." My thoughts scrambled. Research? I analyzed data streams for a modest tech firm. What cipher could possibly lie hidden in quarterly reports and user metrics? Confusion, fear, expected, the stranger continued, stepping closer still, bridging the small gap between us. "But clarity will come. You will understand the reasons for this. Proximity. Why I had to observe, to learn the contours of your existence." My eyes darted wildly, seeking escape where none existed. The stranger filled the doorway. "Trapped." "Please," I managed, striving for a steady tone. "I don't understand any of this. Just tell me what you need." An unsettling softness permeated the stranger's features, stretching into a faint, unnerving smile. "What I need you to embrace your function, to apply your unique aptitude, decode the transmission, the one that promises deliverance for us all." As they spoke, my gaze fell upon a small, dark object resting beside the laptop, a remote control. Instinct, overriding thought, I snatched it, brandishing it like a weapon. "Stay back," I yelled, hoping the unexpected action might startle them into retreat. To my astonishment, the stranger's eyes widened, not with aggression, but with sudden, sharp fear. "No!" they shrieked, a raw, panicked sound. "Don't activate that. You'll disrupt everything." In the ensuing confusion, my finger spasmed, pressing a button. Instantly, a piercing, high-frequency wail erupted, flooding the enclosed space, echoing down through the house. My new security system. The stranger howled, a sound of pure frustration, and lunged. I ducked beneath their grasping arm, scrambling out of the tiny room, back into the main attic space. I could hear them crashing behind me, enraged, but I didn't look back. Down the crude ladder, through the hidden passage, bursting into the familiar hallway. The alarm shrieked relentlessly as I fled the house, stumbling out into the street, just as the night was once again fractured by the approaching wail of sirens. I stood there, trembling violently, gulping the cool night air, my quiet existence fractured, my haven defiled, and I was left grappling with the terrifying certainty. Sometimes the monsters aren't lurking in the shadows beneath. Sometimes they reside just overhead, breathing the same air, watching and waiting. My apartment, 4 rooms tethered by a meager hallway, always struck me as too compact, too mundane for anything truly strange. I keep clutter minimal. Comfort, usually, is easily found within these walls. Yet, for the past fortnight, a nightly ritual has been disturbed. Post-shower, padding barefoot across the floor, I am no longer alone. It isn't the groan of old pipes or the settling sighs of the building. It's a distinct sound, impossible to ignore. A second footfall, an aqueous echo mirroring my own damp steps. Initially, I dismissed it as fancy. Now, doubt festers. Worse, chillingly worse, are the twin trails of moisture blooming on the tiles. Mine, and beside them, another set. I inhabit the second floor of a rather antiquated structure. Though an elevator exists, its rattling protests send me reliably to the stairs. My door yields directly into the living space, furnished sparsely. A compact sofa, a low table, a stand for the television. To the left, a constricted kitchen. Ahead, the short corridor accessing bedroom and bath. It lacks grandeur, but suffices. A year I've lived here, undisturbed by anything beyond the ordinary. Evenings are my time for showering, a necessity after days often ending in sweat or grime. Slippers are anathema. The cool kiss of tile against bare soles is a small preferred comfort, the slight dampness inconsequential. The first anomaly surfaced perhaps 2 weeks past. Towel cinched at my waist, emerging from the steam-filled bathroom. I headed kitchenward for water. Mid-stride, a soft thump sounded, out of sync with my own footfalls. I halted, listening. Silence reigned. A shrug, a continuation. Returning towards the living room, it recurred. A faint slap on tile, the ghost of another bare footfall trailing mine. I froze, breath held captive. Nothing. Water dripping from my hair, perhaps. The squeak of skin on polished floor. I let it go. The following evening, returning late, the shower beckoned immediately. Barefoot again, but now alert, the memory of that phantom step echoed. Walking the short distance from bathroom to bedroom, I listened intently. My feet, tap, tap, tap. And then, undeniably, an almost identical tap, lagging a mere fraction of a second behind. I spun, towel whipping around me. The hallway stretched empty. My pulse thrummed in the quiet. Lowering my gaze, I scanned the floor. One set of damp prints. Mine. Relief warred with a lingering unease. Days bled into nights, and the spectral footstep grew bolder, more frequent. Every post-shower excursion was accompanied by my own tread and its shadow sound. It kept pace, yet always felt slightly removed, inhabiting a space just beyond sight, close enough to unsettle, too far to perceive. Discomfort curdled into anxiety. I tried quickening my pace. The echo matched it. Sometimes I'd break into a near run, slamming the bedroom door shut, pressing my ear to the wood. Silence would descend, thick and absolute, until my own frantic heartbeat became unbearable. One night, driven by a growing dread, I deliberately traced a small circle on the living room tile before the sofa. My wet tracks gleamed under the low light, and then, beside them, fainter impressions materialized, similarly sized, trailing just behind my own path, shaped like footprints, yet paler, as if already yielding to evaporation. Crouching, heart hammering against my ribs, I touched the tile near these ephemeral marks, cool, damp, as if another had stood there moments before. My gaze swept the room, finding only familiar emptiness. A tremor started in my hand. I rose, forcing slow, deep breaths. Now, a knot of tension tightens even before I leave the shower sanctuary. I stand rinsing, then linger, water sheeting off me onto the bath mat, towel clutched like a shield, steeling myself against opening the door, but clothes await. Pushing past the fear, I step out. Inevitably, the sequence begins. My step, the soft echo trailing. A glance back reveals nothing. It follows me. Kitchen, living room, bedroom, maintaining its slight, unnerving distance, forever just out of view. A few nights ago, it escalated. In the kitchen, preparing a simple meal of eggs and toast, still barefoot from my earlier shower, I heard a slap on the towel. Closer this time. Sharply, I turned. Nothing, but there, adjacent to my own stance, glistened a fresh, wet footprint, pointed the same direction, as if someone had just silently approached. The spatula clattered from my grasp. My stomach churned. Adrenaline surged, cold and electric. My palms grew slick. Retreating a few steps, I watched, horrified, as another print formed beside the first, materializing from nothing. No drip from above, no plausible explanation, just appearing. Mouth dry as dust, I snatched a paper towel, pressed it onto the twin marks. It came away damp. I hurled it into the bin, killed the stove flame, abandoned the kitchen and my half-cooked meal. Sleep that night was a fraught, shallow thing. Every creak of the old building jolted me upright. Lying rigid, staring into the darkness, I drifted eventually, only to snap awake hours later, convinced someone stood beside the bed. Fumbling for the lamp, I twisted, eyes darting. Empty space. Sweat beaded on my skin. My mouth felt like sandpaper. Imagination, I told myself, but the conviction felt hollow. Something was deeply wrong. Morning found me scrutinizing the apartment for leaks, for damage, for any rational cause. Every corner, every pipe junction, every ceiling expanse yielded nothing. Walls remained dry. The sole strangeness manifested in the bathroom. Before the sink, 2 sets of footprints. Mine, distinct. The other, fainter, identically sized, displaying that same odd adjacency, always beside my own. I scrubbed the floor with fierce determination, a futile gesture against the encroaching unknown. Several nights later, resolve hardened. Enough. I would stride into the living room post-shower, spin fast, and confront whatever shadowed me. Standing in the bathroom, bracing, legs trembling slightly, breath catching in my throat, I counted silently. 1, 2, 3. I flung the door open, moved swiftly across the hall, into the living area. I whirled, heart pounding a frantic rhythm. At first, only my own wet prints marked the tile. Then, beside them, step by inexorable step, I watched the second set appear, tracing my exact path, forming out of thin air, small dark blooms of moisture on the pale floor. No body, no shadow, nothing. A vice tightened around my chest. Fists clenched. I stood utterly still, breath strangled, blood roaring in my ears. My eyes flickered upwards, searching for a shape, a face. Nothingness greeted me. I took a hesitant step back towards the bathroom. The footsteps sounded again, intimately close behind. I whipped around. Empty air. Only the jewel tracks on the floor. I retreated further, facing the vacant space before me. Impossible! My mind shrieked, even as my eyes confirmed the reality. My back hit the doorframe. I stumbled, catching the knob, and scrambled inside. The door slammed shut. The lock clicked, a useless defense against the intangible. My hand shook violently, heartbeat a painful drum against my ribs. I slid down the door, back against the cool porcelain of the tub, knees drawn tight to my chest, fighting for breath. Time stretched, measured in ragged inhalations. When at last I emerged, no fresh prints appeared, but the apartment felt charged, holding its breath, waiting. I slept, fitfully, on the sofa, lights blazing, television murmuring low. Every closure of my eyes brought the image of those phantom footprints, blooming silently behind me. These past few days, the extra prints manifest more widely. Sometimes they precede me, waiting near the sofa or beneath the coffee table when I enter the living room. Other times, the damp, heavy tread sounds just outside the bathroom door while I'm showering. The hallway light, prone to flickering, remains off. I crave no further unsettling visuals. I've sought explanations, stress, architectural quirks, optical illusions researched online. Nothing accounts for wet footprints materializing before my very eyes. Calling a friend feels impossible. The story sounds like madness, and a part of me fears involving anyone else, fears what might happen if another walked these floors barefoot. Now, exiting the bathroom triggers a surge of pure dread, an anticipation of unseen contact. My nerves are frayed wires. Appetite is a memory. Sleep, a shallow refuge frequently breached. The footsteps grow louder. Last night, a distinct shuffle, the brush of something against the floor tiles, directly behind me. Turning revealed only the prints, mocking my fear. Whatever this is, it feels closer, bolder. The companion prints appear more frequently, sometimes glistening with more moisture, leaving larger damp patches. I've taken to wearing socks, a futile gesture. The bare footprints still appear alongside my socked ones, a silent, damp taunt. Tonight, I sit huddled on the sofa, tapping this account into my phone, needing a record, a testament. Any moment, I expect that wet slap of a footfall. Sweat slicks my palms. My breathing is shallow, rapid. My gaze keeps darting to the hallway entrance, anticipating the slow bloom of moisture on the tile. The terrifying thought persists. A sudden turn, and something might be there, watching. Am I ready for that? I refuse to flee. This is my space. Yet, terror is a constant, cold companion. A flashlight rests beside me, a nonsensical comfort against an enemy light cannot touch. From the bathroom, the faint, rhythmic drip, drip, drip of the showerhead sounds, usually innocuous. Tonight, menacing. Each drop anticipates the other sound, the phantom step. My body is rigid, neck aching from constant vigilance. Perhaps I should just look, confront it, see what there is to see. This limbo of fear is unsustainable. Seeing something might be horrific, but it would be knowledge. Seeing nothing might finally quiet the frantic drumming in my skull. I'm going to stand, walk into the hallway, check. Maybe a swift turn will finally catch it. Right, up now. Legs unsteady, but moving. Heartbeat thunderous, breath loud in the stillness. I reach the hallway's edge, quiet, save for that relentless drip. Bare feet cold on the tile. I step forward. 1 step, 2. A wet slap sounds behind me. I spin, flashlight beam stabbing the space where the sound originated. I see it. The wet footprint, still coalescing, beside my own. Nobody there. A knot clenches deep in my gut. Breath hitches. Another print blooms inches from the first. The light illuminates only empty air. My grip tightens on the flashlight, knuckles white. I cannot remain silent. My voice, a trembling thread, asks, "What do you want?" No answer. Only the drip, drip, drip from the bathroom, heart pounding against my ribs. I take a step back. The second set of footprints mirrors my retreat, staying perfectly parallel. Gooseflesh prickles my entire body. "Run!" my instincts scream, but my legs feel leaden. This presence, whatever it is, seems relentless. How do you confront the invisible, the ephemeral, that which leaves only damp traces? I stand rooted, flashlight beam sweeping frantically, searching for a distortion, an outline, anything, nothing. Yet the footprints keep forming, so close now, right beside me. Swallowing hard, summoning a final shard of courage, I take another step. The mimicry is perfect, synchronous. I pivot again, light spearing the space directly behind. A rush of cold air, inexplicable in the closed hallway, whispers against my skin. A primal tingle races up my spine. I spin back. The footprints are forming again, precisely where my next step should land. I don't know how this ends. Will I walk until it reveals itself? Or freeze here, paralyzed? Denial is no longer an option. I am not alone. Something walks with me, step for step, leaving its chilling, impossible signature in water upon my floor. And I sense, with dreadful certainty, that if I turn, just once, fast enough, I might finally see it. That old rotary telephone, a fossil in ochre plastic I'd unearthed years prior from the dusty chaos of a weekend bazaar, had always been mere ornamentation. A hairline fracture spiderwebbed near the coiled umbilical cord, its dial prone to petulant sticking if spun with undue haste. I positioned it on a slight mahogany stand in the living room, an aesthetic nod to vanished decades. It possessed no connection to the wall, no whisper of active service, purely a relic, a silent testament to analog time. Yet, roughly 4 weeks passed, the inexplicable commenced. Deep in the nocturnal stillness, the phone emitted a strangled peal. Initially, I dismissed it as auditory illusion, a phantom echo dredged from the depths of near sleep. My digital clock glowed, somewhere near 2. The sound, muffled and churning, something unpleasant within me, ceased as I sat bolt upright, straining my ears in the darkness. A dream, I assured myself, sinking back into the pillows. The following night, however, it recurred, closer now, to the witching hour of 3. This wasn't the crisp summons of a modern device. It sounded attenuated, filtered through immense density, perhaps water or formidable walls. Gooseflesh pebbled my arms. Heart slamming against my ribs, I rose, traversed the shadowed apartment, and entered the living room. There it sat, impassive, on its stand. The handset rested snugly in its cradle, the plastic carapace absorbing the weak luminescence filtering in from the street lamp outside. Lifting the receiver felt strangely momentous. Silence greeted me first, profound and absolute, before a faint susurrus emerged, less static, more low, vibrational hum. My grip tightened on the bakelite curve as I waited, breath held captive. No voice materialized. A parched dryness coated my tongue. Replacing the handset, I flooded the apartment with artificial light, seeking solace in illumination. Perhaps vestigial wiring lingered within the walls. I reasoned desperately. Maybe some errant frequency snagged by the antique mechanism. But wishful thinking dissolved when, days later, the calls adopted an unnerving precision. 2:47 a.m. every single night. Ignoring it proved futile. The muted ringing persisted. 4 or 5 cycles, then silence. My nerves frayed into raw filaments. Soon, I found myself anticipating the event, waking minutes before the appointed time, padding into the living room to stand sentinel in the gloom. I'd stare at the inert object, the thudding of my own pulse, a deafening rhythm in my ears. Then, the ring, making me jump invariably. Trembling fingers would reach, lift. Always, the static answered, sometimes punctuated by faint clicks, or a desiccated rasp that hinted disturbingly at respiration. Certainty remained elusive. After a week endured under this auditory siege, I resolved to banish it. I carried the phone down to the building's subterranean storage locker, depositing it in a Stygian corner behind a bulwark of forgotten boxes. Relief washed over me as I ascended the stairs. The subsequent night offered blessed, uninterrupted slumber. 2 nights later, the ringing shattered the peace once more. Heart accelerating, I stumbled from bed, navigated to the living room, and froze. It squatted there, insolent on its familiar perch. Worse, it was now connected, plugged into a wall socket whose existence I'd never registered. The cord snaked along the floorboards, its terminus disappearing mysteriously behind the skirting. Disorientation warred with rising panic. I knew I had relocated it. My hands shook uncontrollably. I stooped, wrenched the plug from the wall, and hefted the phone. Its plastic felt unnaturally cold. This time, I secreted it deep within my wardrobe, behind a barricade of old coats, turning the key in the lock for good measure. That night, precisely at 2:47 a.m., the summons came again. Steeling myself, I entered the living room. The phone was back on its stand. The wardrobe door remained securely locked, yet the object had defied containment. I snatched the receiver from its cradle. Static roared, a brief auditory assault, then subsided into delicate crackles. Through this electrical haze, my name emerged, Silas, uttered in a low, scraping cadence, repeated like a morbid mantra. Silas, Silas. The receiver slipped from my suddenly nerveless grasp. My knees threatened to buckle. Retreating to the bedroom, I slammed the door, the sound echoing the frantic pounding in my chest. Sleep was an impossibility. Morning found me forcing myself back into the living room. The phone sat placidly, as before, yet the cord lay disconnected once more, coiled loosely beside it, silent, inert. A powerful urge to discard it, to hurl it from a window or pulverize it, wrestled with an equally potent counterforce. Fear was a cold knot in my stomach, yet a strange compulsion stayed my hand. Not possession, precisely, but an undeniable magnetism, a perverse curiosity demanding I engage with this absurdity, perhaps wrest some logic from the illogical. I began setting my alarm for 2:45 a.m., preempting the call. A ritual formed. Wake, wait by the phone, lift the receiver on the first muffled ring. Each time yielded the same unsatisfying result. Static, elusive whispers, enigmatic clicks. Occasionally, I'd wait, straining for a coherent phrase. Sometimes I'd venture questions into the void. Who is this? What is it you want? receiving only the hiss of the abyss in return. One night stands stark in memory. The sound wasn't static, but breathing, slow and agonizingly labored. My own breath hitched, shallow and erratic. The frantic pulse in my temples became a physical pressure. "Hello," I managed, my voice thin. "Can you hear me, Silas?" The response, if it was one, remained a murmurous susurration, indecipherable, just beyond the threshold of comprehension. Hanging up, I stared at the phone, palms slick with sweat, mind racing in frantic, unproductive circles. Sleep became a scarce commodity. Nodding off at my desk became commonplace. My supervisor, Alistair, inquired with concerned eyes. I mumbled excuses about chronic insomnia. Divulging the truth felt ludicrous, an invitation to ridicule or disbelief. Friends might jest about poltergeists or arcane curses, but the reality held no humor for me. A perpetual unease settled over my apartment, lending shadows a deeper, more menacing quality, even in daylight. Every glance towards the phone sent a fresh wave of anxiety through me, anticipating the nightly ordeal. My temper shortened, restlessness becoming my default state. Colleagues noticed the decline, their polite inquiries deflected with increasing curtness. Driven to seek some rational explanation, I contacted a telecommunications provider after another week of this torment. Could a disconnected phone, I asked, possibly ring due to stray signals, atmospheric interference? The technician on the line sounded skeptical, confessing he'd never encountered such a phenomenon. Radio frequency interference was suggested, tentatively, but it failed to account for the whispers, the breathing, the chillingly personal static. His ultimate advice was prosaic: dispose of the device. Frustration mounted. I nearly followed his counsel. Phone in hand, I walked towards the apartment door, resolve hardening, only to halt abruptly. A constricting tightness seized my chest. Defeated, I returned the phone to its designated spot. Why this paralysis? Why couldn't I simply be rid of it? A quiet insistence echoed in my mind. Tonight's call must be answered. That evening unfolded with forced calm. A meager dinner, desultory television viewing, a conscious effort to ignore the tyranny of the clock. I performed push-ups on the living room floor, attempting to exercise the nervous energy coiling within me. Still, my gaze strayed relentlessly towards the ochre plastic sentinel. I felt agitated, my muscles taut bundles of apprehension. Midnight found me in bed, staring sightlessly at the ceiling. Sleep, an elusive phantom. When the clock digits shifted to 2:46 a.m., I rose, the familiar acceleration of my heartbeat preceding me. I positioned myself beside the phone. Punctually, it issued its 4 muffled summonses. On the first ring, I lifted the receiver. The customary hiss bloomed, then receded. "I'm here," I stated, my voice steadier than anticipated. "I can hear you." A faint whisper answered, possibly my name again. "Silas." Dampness beaded on my forehead. Forcing the words out, I pressed. "I'm listening. What is it you want?" The static crackled, swelling and diminishing in rhythmic waves, as if striving towards articulation. For a full minute, I stood rigid, clutching the handset, every fiber of my being taut with anticipation. Finally, a single, distorted vocable pierced the noise, utterly garbled, before the line abruptly died. The remainder of the night was spent in wakeful vigil, staring at the silent phone. The following day, I embarked on a campaign of electronic silence, methodically unplugging television, stereo, lamps, anything that might conceivably generate interference. The phone remained quiescent during daylight hours, but paranoia demanded thoroughness. I inspected the walls meticulously for hidden jacks or clandestine wiring. Nothing. Night descended. The ritual resumed. At 2:47 a.m., the inevitable ring. I snatched the receiver, holding my breath. The static felt harsher this time, almost abrasive against my ear. Indistinct mumbling followed. "I cannot hear you," I pleaded, my voice betraying a tremor. "Speak more clearly." For a fleeting instant, the static receded, allowing my name, Silas, to emerge, repeated in a slow, hypnotic chant. "Silas, Silas, Silas." My chest constricted. My hands began to tremble violently. The impulse to hurl the receiver across the room was nearly overwhelming. Instead, I forced it back onto the cradle, panting, mind a chaotic whirl of fear and confusion. Terrified, yes, but also inexorably drawn deeper into the mystery. What did it signify? My nights shifted to the living room couch, proximity ensuring I wouldn't miss the call. A small notebook lay open on the coffee table, a futile attempt to capture any recognizable words or phrases amidst the auditory chaos. Most nights yielded nothing but static and sibilant whispers. Occasionally, a dry, rasping laugh or a sudden cough echoed through the line. Sometimes, syllables resembling fragments of my name surfaced, only to dissolve back into the noise. I scribbled random characters I thought I perceived, R, N, S, meaningless jumbles. My apartment mirrored my internal state, disordered, neglected. Coffee cups proliferated, testament to my constant state of caffeine-fueled vigilance and exhaustion. Meals became hasty, functional necessities before the long wait resumed. My existence began to orbit entirely around that impending nocturnal connection. Friendships withered under neglect. Invitations went unanswered. Texts ignored. Answers were paramount, the pursuit of some elusive revelation just beyond my grasp. My reflection became that of a stranger. Pallid complexion, shadowed eyes, rumpled attire. Every mundane sound, the refrigerator's hum, the floorboards creak, provoked a startled response. My nerves stretched to the breaking point. One night, I attempted aggression. When the phone rang, I answered with forced belligerence. "Stop this. Leave me alone." My voice cracked, betraying the fear beneath the anger. The static surged in response, escalating into an almost palpable snarl. It reached a crescendo, then abruptly ceased. Silence. A fleeting sense of triumph surged through me. Had I finally intimidated it? Seconds later, the phone rang again, louder, more insistent than ever before. Lifting the receiver, I hissed, "What do you want from me, Silas?" A blast of static punished my ear, making me recoil. Then, the slow, relentless repetition of my name resumed, sounding nearer this time, intimate, as if whispered directly into the auditory canal. I slammed the phone down, hands shaking, my entire body flushed with a volatile mixture of rage and terror. Intolerable, yet inescapable. The following week saw no deviation. Every night, the call arrived. My perception of time grew distorted, elastic. Dread for the approaching night warred with the perverse yearning for it. I caught myself counting down the hours, the minutes, to 2:47 a.m. I paced the living room, sometimes lifting the receiver prematurely, hoping to catch it off guard, to hear something beyond the appointed moment, but the connection only initiated at that precise minute, never before, never after, and when it rang, I answered. My approach varied: calm inquiry, furious demands, desperate pleading. The responses remained constant, the unsettling soundscape of static, whispers, and, intermittently, my name intoned in that dreadful cadence. Each call left me depleted and terrified, yet the compulsion to continue, to achieve some breakthrough, remained unshaken. I craved coherence, full sentences, and explanation for the siege upon my sanity. In a moment of desperate ingenuity, I tried recording the calls, placing my smartphone's voice recorder beside the rotary phone during the nightly event. Listening back the next day yielded only frustration, faint background static, devoid of whispers, devoid of my name. Even the distinctive muffled ring itself failed to register on the digital recording. It was as if the phenomenon existed solely for me in that specific moment, amplifying my sense of isolation. No proof, no corroboration, alone with this nightly theater of the absurd and terrifying. Then, a few nights ago, a shift occurred. The ring came, I answered. The static resolved into a low, resonant hum that pulsed rhythmically in my ear. A retracted exhale followed, impossibly close. "I'm here," I whispered, voice unsteady despite my resolve. "Silas is listening." The hum intensified. A soft shuffling sound transmitted through the line, like fabric shifting against a chair. My scalp tingled with primal fear. I waited, braced for a voice. Instead, the temperature in the room plummeted abruptly. My breath hitched, lodging painfully in my throat. The air felt glacial against my skin. Clutching the receiver tighter, I heard it. A faint, deliberate scraping noise, metal on metal perhaps, transmitted through the line. My heart hammered against my ribs. A frantic drumbeat. I opened my mouth to speak, to scream, but no sound emerged. The line went dead. I remained standing there, panting, the cold plastic of the phone still pressed against my ear. This latest escalation spurred one final desperate attempt at disposal. I entombed the phone in layers of thick plastic refuse bags, sealing each layer meticulously with duct tape until it resembled a bizarre, mummified parcel. Driving miles out of the city, beyond the skeletal remains of industrial parks, I located a large, reeking dumpster behind a derelict warehouse. With a sense of profound unease, as if handling hazardous material, I cast the bundle into the darkness within. The drive home was fraught, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. That night, I collapsed into bed early, praying for oblivion. At 2:47 a.m., the muffled ring dragged me from sleep's fragile sanctuary. I shot upright, chest painfully tight. Stumbling into the living room, my blood ran cold. There it sat, on its stand, utterly denuded of plastic and tape. The handset lay beside it, off the cradle, as if mid-call, and the cord, once again, was plugged firmly into the wall. A wave of nauseating dread washed over me. My head throbbed. Mechanically, I picked up the receiver. Static clawed at my ear. "I can't endure this," I gasped, my mouth impossibly dry, my voice ragged. The static coalesced into a sharp hiss, and then my name. Silas, Silas, Silas. Hanging up, I stood paralyzed for a moment before grabbing my mobile phone. Who would I call? The police? A friend? The futility struck me instantly. How could I possibly articulate this madness? Lowering the phone, I simply stared at the cursed rotary device. So here I remain, ensnared, waiting for 2:47 a.m., an appointment I cannot break. I hover on the precipice of some abyssal revelation, yet simultaneously feel the foundations of my own mind crumbling. My heart leaps into a frantic rhythm, merely thinking about the next call. The apartment shrinks around me, its walls pressing closer. Entering the living room after dark requires immense willpower, yet as the crucial hour approaches, an irresistible force draws me in. I creep towards the stand, pulse thundering, and wait for the ring. It always comes. I always answer. Cessation feels impossible, explanation beyond reach. And nightly, the static seems to gain definition. The whispers grow bolder, more articulate. Sometimes, long after hanging up, I fancy I hear my name echoing not from the phone, but from within the chambers of my own skull. What awaits if I cease answering? What awaits if I continue? The not knowing is its own torture. Yet, I cannot resist. Each time the summons comes, I lift the receiver, feeling the terrible tension coil ever tighter within my chest. Something demands an audience, and a desperate, terrified part of me still burns to know why. The opening salvo screamed past my skull, a violent punctuation mark shattering the woodland symphony. Birds erupted from the canopy like shrapnel. In that fractured second, the idyllic escape we craved warped into a desperate scramble for existence. Months of anticipation had led us here, 4 souls yearning to shed the city's abrasive skin and dissolve into the embrace of the wild. Our pilgrimage had been meticulously planned. Myself, Finn, my steadfast companion, Leo, his partner, Maya, and Sam, the easygoing glue of our quartet. We sought genuine solitude, venturing deep into the national forest, far beyond marked trails and crowded clearings, pursuing that elusive sensation of being utterly alone with the pines and the sky. Our journey outward was a tapestry woven with laughter and shared melodies from worn-out playlists. We navigated by whim, pausing for kitschy roadside marvels, watching the urban geometry soften into undulating hills and then thicken into dense ancient woods. We claimed our haven late that Friday, a modest clearing cradled by towering evergreens, a brook murmuring nearby secrets. Tents rose like canvas mushrooms, firewood was gathered with a satisfying heft, and we surrendered to an evening we believed would be steeped in tranquility. That first night delivered its promise. Marshmallows caramelized over dancing flames, ghost stories whispered into the deepening dark, conversations meandering late under a profligate scatter of stars. The air, crisp and untainted, hummed with cricket song and the distant interrogation of an owl. How fortunate we felt, I mused, to have stumbled upon this untouched fragment of paradise. Saturday dawned bright, pulling us from sleep with the promise of exploration. Fortified by instant grains and gritty camp coffee, we plunged into the forest. The path, indistinct and overgrown, spoke of infrequent passage, amplifying our sense of discovery. Hours melted away as we navigated tangled greenery, uncovering hidden cascades and glimpsing fleeting wildlife. Yet, turning back towards camp, a subtle dissonance crept in. I sensed it first, an abrupt, unnatural stillness settling over the woods, as if the very air held its breath. The birdsong had ceased, the breeze had died. "Wait," I murmured, halting. "Listen." Leo tilted his head, brow furrowed. "To what?" "Precisely," I answered. "The silence. It's too complete. As if summoned, a sharp crack echoed from the undergrowth nearby. We spun towards the sound, eyes straining against the dappled shadows, finding only shifting leaves. "Just a deer, probably," Maya offered, though a tremor betrayed her conviction. Our pace quickened, an unspoken urgency propelling us back towards the perceived sanctuary of our camp. With every step, the unnerving sensation of being observed intensified. Each rustle became a potential footfall, every shadow a lurking form. We burst into the clearing, half braced for wreckage, overturned tents, scattered supplies, but everything remained undisturbed, precisely as we'd left it. A collective exhalation escaped us. "See?" Sam attempted a laugh, the sound thin. "Worked up over nothing." The reprieve evaporated swiftly. As twilight bled into the sky and we began preparing our evening meal, a low growl intruded. An engine, somewhere distant, steadily drawing nearer. The sound swelled, accompanied by the harsh crunch of tires biting into the unkempt earth of the old logging trace that served as our access. Abruptly, a bruised pickup truck lurched into view, skidding to a halt in a plume of settling dust. 3 figures emerged. They were broad, clad in worn flannel and camouflage, their faces obscured by untamed beards. They carried an aura of grim belonging, like figures clawed from some grim, forgotten ballad, and a cold certainty solidified in my gut. We were intruders, and we were unwelcome. The eldest, his face bisected by a faded scar, stepped forward, his gaze sweeping over us with unnerving appraisal. "Well now," he drawled, the sound scraping like dry leaves. "Looky what the woods dragged in." Leo, ever the peacemaker, summoned a strained smile. "Evening," he ventured. "Just camping out the weekend. Hope we're not on your property. Didn't see any signs." The man's eyes, chips of flint, narrowed. "Ain't your property, city boy. This here's ours. Always has been." My gaze flickered towards Maya, then Sam. My own rising dread mirrored in their expressions. Miles from any road, bereft of signal, help was a phantom concept. We were utterly at their mercy. "We're sorry," Maya said, her voice tight but level. "We weren't aware. We can pack up, leave right now." The scarred man mulled this over, a slow, deliberate rotation of his head. "Nah," he decided finally. "Don't think so. You folks ain't going nowhere just yet. Not till we figure what to do with ya." It was then I registered the firearms. Each man bore a rifle slung casually over a shoulder. The leader cradled a shotgun loosely in his grip. The air turned glacial. The gravity of our predicament crashed down. The ensuing hours devolved into a slow-motion nightmare. Under their watchful eyes, we were forced to remain by our own dwindling campfire as they methodically plundered our tents, claiming our food, our beer, our small comforts. Their conversation was a low current of mockery and thinly veiled menace. Leo radiated suppressed fury, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. I silently pleaded with him to hold his temper. As true night descended, the demeanor curdled further. Arguments erupted amongst them, voices rising in frustration and malice. Fragments drifted towards us. Talk of lessons, of making examples. In that instant, the imperative became absolute. Escape. I met Leo's gaze across the firelight, flicking my eyes towards the dense woods bordering the clearing. Understanding dawned instantly. I saw him lean in, whispering urgently to Maya and Sam. We coiled, waiting for an opening, muscles screaming with tension. It arrived when the youngest of the trio, unsteady on his feet, lurched away from the fire's glow towards the trees. We didn't hesitate. We exploded into motion, plunging into the black embrace of the undergrowth. Branches lashed our faces, the forest floor treacherous beneath our pounding feet. Behind us, enraged shouts erupted, followed by the sound that would forever echo in the chambers of my memory, the deafening roar of a shotgun. The blast ripped through the night air, terrifyingly close. I felt the concussion, heard pellets shredding leaves mere inches away. Panic lent us impossible speed, adrenaline overriding the burn in our lungs. They were pursuing, crashing through the woods like enraged beasts, their voices thick with fury and a chilling promise of violence. Another shot cracked the darkness, then a third. Blind volleys into the night, hoping chance would guide their aim. We ran until running felt abstract, an act detached from exhausted limbs and searing lungs. It seemed an eternity before the sounds of pursuit dwindled, then vanished altogether. Still, we pushed onward, terror a relentless goad. Finally, utterly spent, we collapsed into a shallow ravine, gulping air in ragged, painful bursts. Silence descended, thick and heavy, broken only by our frantic breathing. We lay listening, every nerve straining for any hint of pursuit. "Now what?" Maya whispered at last, her voice a threadbare sound in the immense quiet. I looked at my friends, their faces etched with fear in the faint starlight. Lost, stripped of supplies, directionless, with armed men potentially still combing the woods behind us. "We keep moving," I forced out, injecting a confidence I didn't possess. Downhill, bound to hit a road, a house, something. The night became a long, stumbling ordeal. We navigated by instinct through the oppressive dark, starting at every nocturnal rustle, convinced each snapped twig heralded the return of our tormentors. Dawn found us, hollow-eyed, dehydrated, adorned with scratches and bruises, but miraculously, still breathing. And then, as the first tentative fingers of light painted the eastern sky, we heard it, the most beautiful sound imaginable, the distant hum of traffic. We had found a highway. The authorities initially met our frantic story with a degree of professional skepticism, but the evidence at our ravaged campsite, discarded beer cans bearing unfamiliar brands, cigarette ends, the glint of spent shotgun casings, lent credence to our harrowing account. A search was organized, but to my knowledge, the men who held us captive, who hunted us through the night, were never apprehended. Years have passed. The sharp edges of that weekend have dulled, yet the memory remains a visceral presence. The woods, once a sanctuary, now feel menacing. A sudden rustle of leaves, the unexpected crack of a branch underfoot. These simple sounds can instantly transport me back to that abyss of fear. We, the survivors, rarely speak of it directly, but sometimes, in a quiet moment, I'll see Leo's gaze drift towards a tree line, his eyes scanning with a familiar wariness, and I know. We remember. We were lucky. We endured. Yet the question lingers. Are they still out there, those men, lords of their violent domain, waiting in the deep woods for the next unsuspecting souls to wander into their sights? I choose to believe not. But just in case, the city's concrete embrace feels safer now. Some wildernesses, I've learned the hard way, are best left untamed and unexplored.